Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still in the packed Congressional hearing room, the overhead lights glinting off her emerald green suit as she listened with unwavering focus to the rising confrontation. Across the table, former Florida attorney General Pam Bondi stood, her face flushed with anger, finger pointed sharply at Crockett, her voice booming through the speakers. "You have absolutely no authority to question my integrity." Bondi's outburst echoed across the chamber, lawmakers shifting uncomfortably in their seats. But what happened next left everyone stunned. Instead of meeting fire with fire, Crockett leaned forward, calmly adjusted her microphone, took a slow sip of water, and delivered a response so measured and sharp that within hours, the clip would explode online, becoming the most talked-about moment of the hearing. Before we dive into this electrifying exchange, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss our real-time political breakdowns. The energy in the room was thick as CSP's cameras swept across the crowded space. The Oversight Committee meeting had drawn national attention, with both parties bracing for fireworks over a major federal funding bill. Pam Bondi, famous for her aggressive courtroom style, sat at the witness table in a navy blazer, exuding confidence as Republicans presented her as their star witness. On the other side, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the freshman Democrat from Texas with a formidable civil rights law background, reviewed her notes. At 42, Crockett had already built a reputation for being concise, sharp, and unafraid to challenge power. Her bright green suit stood out against the dark wood, her braided hair framing a steady, determined face. Chairman James Lankford opened the hearing with a firm tap of the gavel. "Today we are reviewing federal spending in the proposed infrastructure package," he announced. The opening statements were routine until Bondi took center stage. Unapologetic and assertive, she declared, "This bill is blatant fiscal irresponsibility," accusing Democrats of using funding allocations as political favors instead of addressing real infrastructure needs. Some Republicans nodded in agreement while Democrats leaned in, scribbling notes. Camera operators captured every reaction as Bondi pressed on, comparing the bill to corruption cases she claimed to have prosecuted. "The American people deserve clarity, not political theater disguised as policy," she concluded. When questioning began, senior committee members followed their usual partisan lines. Republicans tossed Bondi easy questions, letting her expand on her criticisms. Democrats tried to counter, but Bondi batted away each challenge. The divide grew sharper with every exchange. Then Chairman Lankford announced, "The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Miss Crockett, for 5 minutes." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Those familiar with Crockett's analytical style straightened in their seats. Bondi's confident expression remained, but she was clearly bracing for a tougher round. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Crockett began, her tone calm and professional. "Miss Bondi, thank you for being here today." She glanced at a document before continuing. "Before we get into the details of this bill, I want to clarify a few points regarding your experience with federal fund oversight during your time as Florida's Attorney General." Bondi nodded, still confident. But what followed would shift the hearing's entire direction. Crockett looked Bondi directly in the eye. "Miss Bondi, earlier you mentioned your experience in identifying misuse of federal funds. Could you explain your involvement in the $300,000 in pandemic relief funds originally marked for Florida small businesses, funds that were redirected in 2021 to an unrelated highway project?" A flicker of surprise crossed Bondi's face before she replied, "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Congresswoman. I left office in 2019. I had no role involving pandemic relief money." Crockett nodded, unfazed. "Yes, I'm aware of your time in office. I'm referring to the consulting work your firm performed afterward, specifically your involvement in reviewing federal fund allocations, including this reallocation." The room grew noticeably still as committee members sensed the tension building. Bondi's posture stiffened. "My firm offered general guidance. We were not responsible for specific decisions," she said defensively. Crockett held up a document. "This email from October 2021 shows your direct approval of the reallocation from small business relief to the Palmetto Highway project. A project where your firm also represented one of the major contractors? Would you like to revise your statement? The camera zoomed in as Bondi's expression hardened. That's a distortion of a complicated matter, she snapped. Those funds were redirected properly after the small business program was completed. Crockett remained composed. That's interesting, because the Florida Small Business Association filed a complaint stating they only received 60% of their intended funding before the money was redirected. She held up the evidence. Their filing is right here. How do you explain that? For the next minute, Crockett presented document after document, each one contradicting Bondi's earlier claims. With every new fact, Bondi's responses grew sharper, her voice tenser. Eventually, after Crockett revealed a document showing potential conflicts connected to Bondi's consulting firm, Bondi snapped. She stood halfway from her chair, face burning with anger, and shouted, "This is outrageous! You're twisting information to create political drama. You've barely been in Congress for a year. You have no right to question my integrity with cherry-picked documents." The outburst sent ripples across the room. Lawmakers stared in shock, some whispering to colleagues. Chairman Langford reached for the gavel, but Bondi continued, her voice booming. "You Democrats twist facts for your little viral clips? I've served Florida honorably for years. This is nothing but a stunt." Her voice cracked with fury, fingers still jabbing toward Crockett. But through it all, Crockett sat completely still, unmoved, composed, unreadable. The cameras captured the stark contrast, Bondi raging. Crockett calmed as Bondi finally paused to breathe. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Crockett. She slowly adjusted her microphone, took a quiet sip of water, looked Bondi directly in the eyes, and spoke in a steady voice that cut through the silence like a blade. "Miss Bondi," she said, her tone gentle but devastating, "I didn't come here to question your integrity. Your own emails already did that." The atmosphere was already tense, but Bondi's explosive outburst pushed it to a breaking point. Her voice echoed around the chamber, her face red with frustration as she stared down Crockett. Cameras captured every detail of Bondi's emotional reaction, standing in sharp contrast to Crockett's steady calm. Committee members shifted awkwardly, unsure whether Chairman Langford would intervene. Even the audience fell silent, phones raised, sensing something remarkable was about to unfold. Crockett responded with cool precision. "I didn't come here to question your integrity. Your own emails speak for themselves," she said, her tone even and controlled. She never raised her voice or matched Bondi's anger. "The American people deserve accountability, Miss Bondi, not yelling, not misdirection, just accountability." Crockett held direct eye contact the whole time, unshaken. She pointed out how Bondi criticized the bill for fiscal irresponsibility while her own record revealed troubling inconsistencies. When Bondi attempted to cut her off, Crockett calmly asserted, "I haven't finished my time, Ms. Bondi, and I'd appreciate the same courtesy I offered during your testimony." The firmness in her voice made Bondi fall silent, visibly furious but unable to respond. Crockett then addressed the chairman. "Mr. Chairman, I'd like these documents entered into the record." A staff member delivered a folder containing emails, a formal complaint from the Florida Small Business Association, and financial disclosures, linking Bondi's consulting work to contractors who benefited from redirected funds. Langford approved the request with a noticeably quieter tone. Turning back to Bondi, Crockett continued, "You've served for years, and I respect that. But when you testify about financial oversight, your own decisions become relevant." She picked up another paper, one Bondi clearly wasn't expecting. "This internal audit from the Florida State Controller's Office flags this very transaction as irregular and recommends further review. Did you know about this?" Bondi's expression shifted instantly. Her anger drained into visible worry. I haven't seen that," Bondi stammered. "That's unfortunate," Crockett replied calmly, "because it was sent to your office 3 separate times for comment." Cameras zoomed in on Bondi as the realization hit her. She glanced toward her Republican colleagues, but none offered help. Crockett pressed on. "You say you're here to talk about proper use of funds, yet this evidence suggests otherwise. Americans deserve honesty, not contradictions. Phones in the gallery captured every second as Crockett dismantled Bondi's claims with calm accuracy. One woman relied on volume, the other relied on facts. And it was clear which approach was winning. Crockett glanced at the timer. "My time is nearly up. Let me close with this. Experience doesn't matter if your answers aren't backed by truth. Instead of attacking me or raising your voice, simply address the documented inconsistencies." She straightened her papers and nodded. "I yield back." The room stayed silent for several seconds. Langford finally cleared his throat. "The gentlewoman yields back. We'll take a 10-minute recess." As the gavel fell, the room burst into movement. Journalists rushed out, spectators whispered, and staffers scrambled. Bondi sat frozen, staring at her notes, the fight gone from her posture. Crockett, meanwhile, packed her documents neatly and left with the same calm confidence she started with. Outside the chamber, news outlets immediately began broadcasting the showdown. "A stunning scene today," one reporter said. Former Florida egg Pam Bondi lost control while Congresswoman Crockett responded with ice-cold precision. Clips spread rapidly online. Calm Crockett and Bondi meltdown climbed trending lists across platforms. Millions viewed short clips of Crockett's most powerful lines, praising her composure and command of facts. Commentators weighed in. "Bondi tried to overpower her with emotion," one analyst said. "But Crockett came prepared with documents. Details and discipline," another added. "This was a masterclass in staying calm under pressure." Even networks with opposing viewpoints couldn't ignore the moment. Some argued Crockett was too aggressive. Others said Bondi was unprepared, but viewers overwhelmingly saw a clear winner. The hearing resumed 20 minutes later, but Bondi's demeanor was noticeably subdued. She answered questions carefully, avoiding confrontation. Crockett stayed professional and steady, giving no hint of triumph. Though everyone present knew they had witnessed a defining political moment. By nightfall, the confrontation had become a viral sensation. A routine hearing had transformed into national drama. Social media exploded with reactions comparing Bondi's emotional fury to Crockett's unshakable calm. In the battle between anger and evidence, composure had won, and the impact would follow both women long after the hearing ended. Some commentators immediately argued that the questions directed at Bondi were intentionally crafted to spark an emotional reaction. But even conservative analysts admitted that the optics of the confrontation were difficult to defend. One Republican strategist put it bluntly: "No matter what the facts are, yelling while the person questioning you stays calm never looks good to the public." On MSNBC, hosts replayed long sections of the exchange, praising Crockett's steady approach. "This is what genuine oversight looks like," an anchor said. Focused questions supported by documents, delivered without insults or theatrics. The viral moment quickly expanded far beyond political news. Entertainment sites picked up the clip with dramatic headlines like, "Congressional clapback, watch a new member school a veteran without breaking a sweat." Even sports commentators joined the conversation, with a well-known ESPN personality tweeting, "Crockett just gave a masterclass in staying composed. Let your opponent lose their cool while you stay on strategy. That's championship-level discipline." By evening, late-night comedy hosts were already including the incident in their monologues. One joked, "Pam Bondi learned a valuable lesson today. If you're going to challenge a queen, at least whisper while doing it." Online comment sections were similarly decisive. Viewers across political lines praised Crockett's calm approach. "I don't agree with Democrats very often," one self-identified conservative commented. "But anyone who can present facts without screaming earns my respect." Another viewer wrote, "My daughter wants to be a lawyer. I'm showing her this clip. This is how you stand your ground with facts, evidence, and total composure." As the video spread, journalists began examining the substance of Crockett's questions. Several Florida news outlets published articles digging into the pandemic relief fund reallocation Crockett mentioned. Many ran headlines such as, "Was Bondi's firm involved in redirecting small business relief funds?" The Jacksonville Times-Union released a detailed report confirming key parts of Crockett's statements. Internal emails showed Bondi's consulting firm had provided guidance on shifting funds. originally meant for small businesses to contractors who happened to be her clients. The paper also verified the existence of the state controller's audit Crockett, referenced during the hearing. By the next morning, the story had grown far beyond a viral moment. Morning news shows featured the confrontation prominently, noting that Crockett's questions raised serious concerns that went unanswered. A political scientist explained, "What makes this moment different is that beneath the dramatic exchange are actual documents, emails, and an audit pointing to potential conflicts of interest. This isn't just about who stayed calm. It's about accountability." The impact on both women was immediate. Crockett's social media following skyrocketed. Her account gained over 200,000 new followers in less than a day. Her office received messages of support from across the country, including from independents and moderate Republicans who admired her professionalism. Progressive groups quickly used the moment to raise funds, sharing the clip with slogans like "Support leaders who fight with facts, not shouting." Crockett's campaign reported receiving small-dollar donations from every state. For Bondi, the consequences were far more difficult. Several organizations that had booked her for future speaking events quietly removed her from their programs. GOP strategists urged future committee witnesses to learn from Bondi's response, warning that emotional reactions only create openings for critics. More troubling were the investigations now underway. The Tampa Bay Times announced a deeper inquiry into the relief fund reallocations. The Florida Small Business Association issued a statement thanking Crockett for raising issues their members had questioned for more than a year. Bondi's official response came through a written statement from her spokesperson, claiming the hearing was a partisan ambush intended to distract from what she called major flaws in the Democratic spending bill. The statement asserted support for Bondi's record and promised to address what it described as mischaracterizations of her consulting work. But critics quickly pointed out that the statement avoided addressing the specific documents Crockett cited. By midday, Bondi appeared on a supportive cable news program in an attempt to shift the narrative. But the effort struggled to counter the viral images of her shouting while Crockett stayed composed, images that dominated social media and news coverage through the day. Crockett, meanwhile, continued to project calm professionalism. When asked about the exchange the next morning, she simply said, "Yesterday's hearing was about oversight of federal funds. That remains my focus regardless of how witnesses choose to respond." Her understated reply only strengthened the perception that she was committed to facts, not theatrics. Analysts from across the political spectrum agreed that the moment resonated because it reflected something rare: a political confrontation where evidence and composure overpowered shouting and emotional displays. Many Americans, worn out by constant political chaos, found Crockett's response refreshing. In a political climate often dominated by heated arguments, her quiet, disciplined approach stood out. Within 48 hours, the video had surpassed 50 million views across platforms. The moment became more than just a viral clip, it turned into a cultural reference point, used as an example of professionalism, debate strategy, and the evolving tone of political communication. 3 days after the explosive exchange, the ripple effects continued nationwide. What began as a routine oversight hearing had transformed into a defining moment for both women, one that carried consequences extending far beyond the hearing room. For Crockett, the surge in attention translated into new opportunities. Her office received calls from major media outlets and magazines. Time magazine contacted her team about participating in a feature on rising leaders in Congress. Several national talk shows requested interviews not only about the confrontation, but also her broader legislative priorities and background. Even more significant was the attention from senior Democratic leadership. Reports indicated that Crockett had received personal calls from higher-ranking members of the party, praising her preparation and professionalism. Internal discussions reportedly began about giving her more prominent committee roles and higher visibility positions. The House Democratic leader told reporters, "Congresswoman Crockett demonstrated exactly what effective oversight looks like: prepared, factual, and unshaken. That's the standard." The sudden attention brought both opportunities and challenges. Her staff struggled to manage the high volume of calls and messages, requiring temporary reinforcements. Security around her office was tightened after she received a small number of threatening messages from individuals. Angered by her questioning of Bondi, Crockett continued her work without any visible change in demeanor. She attended committee hearings, floor votes, and meetings as usual, declining most interview requests. Her communications director said, "The Congresswoman appreciates the support, but believes meaningful work speaks louder than media appearances." Political consultants praised her approach. "She's handling this perfectly," one said. "She's not chasing the spotlight. She's letting the moment show who she is, a serious, fact-focused lawmaker with long-term goals." Meanwhile, Bondi's situation worsened. Despite her media appearances, the most dominant images remained those of her shouting, while Crockett stayed calm. Visuals that overshadowed her attempts to reframe the situation. More damaging were the growing investigations. The Tampa Bay Times published a detailed report confirming many of Crockett's claims, including evidence showing Bondi's firm advised officials on redirecting funds intended for small businesses. Internal emails revealed Bondi's personal involvement in discussions related to the reallocation, conflicting with statements she made before the committee. Soon after, two organizations quietly canceled her future speaking engagements. The Florida Bar Association confirmed it had received ethics complaints about potential conflicts of interest involving her consulting work. Bondi's allies dismissed the scrutiny as politically motivated, but the momentum of investigative reporting continued to build. Several conservative commentators argued that the entire exchange was staged to undermine Bondi and shift attention away from the Democrats' spending plan. One Fox News host called it classic political distraction, insisting that Democrats were trying to move the spotlight from what they described as excessive government spending. But those defenses quickly weakened as Crockett's documented evidence and follow-up, reporting from multiple newsrooms, confirmed the authenticity of the material she presented. Even some right-leaning outlets admitted the issues raised warranted genuine discussion instead of partisan deflection. Beyond the immediate fallout, the clash ignited a national conversation about evolving expectations in public debate. Writers compared Crockett's calm, fact-driven approach with Bondi's emotional style, and most concluded that Crockett's method was far more effective. A columnist for The Atlantic summarized it this way: "In today's world where any moment can be replayed endlessly, composure isn't just etiquette, it's strategic power." Crockett understood that. Bondi didn't. Psychologists also weighed in, explaining that Crockett's steady demeanor reflected proven techniques for handling tense confrontations. A behavioral expert noted in a widely circulated analysis that staying calm while the other person grows emotional helps maintain credibility with audiences. Teachers across the country even use the clips in lessons on debate, communication, and conflict resolution. One high school debate coach in Michigan told a reporter that he had his team study the exchange because it showed how preparation and self-control outperform shouting. Law professors followed suit, incorporating the moment into courses on trial advocacy. A Georgetown law professor praised Crockett's technique: pausing, taking a sip of water, and responding with facts instead of emotion, calling it a skill every future litigator should master. By the end of the week, something rare happened. Americans across party lines agreed on which communication style worked better. Polls showed that 76% of people trusted a calm speaker far more than someone who responds with anger or volume. That shift translated into real political benefits for Crockett. Her fundraising surged, especially from small donors nationwide, and members of Congress began seeking her guidance on messaging and committee strategy. A senior Democratic strategist described the moment as a turning point, saying Crockett had evolved from a promising newcomer into a communications force, someone who could be powerful without theatrics. Bondi, however, faced a very different outcome. Republican strategists privately acknowledged that her response had backfired, hurting not only her personally but also the party's broader messaging about spending and accountability. One GOP consultant said the problem wasn't just her temper. It was that she reinforced everything voters dislike about political arguments: yelling, finger-pointing, and personal attacks instead of real solutions. As the initial viral moment faded, analysts began focusing on the long-term impact. The exchange left behind a rare shared lesson: facts delivered calmly will always carry more influence than heated emotion. While the specific policy debate would eventually fade, the image of Crockett staying composed in the face of Bondi's anger became a lasting symbol of effective communication. 2 weeks after the hearing, the paths of both women looked dramatically different. Crockett's viral moment had boosted her reputation and earned her a spot on a special task force on government accountability, a notable accomplishment for a first-term representative. Senior lawmakers who had rarely interacted with her now sought her insight on communication and oversight strategy. The House Majority Leader praised her during a briefing, saying she demonstrated how preparation and fact-based questioning cut through political noise. Crockett used her growing influence wisely, focusing on policy rather than media appearances. She introduced bipartisan legislation that would tighten disclosure requirements for former government officials who become consultants. The Washington Post profiled her as a lawmaker combining civil rights expertise with a new generation's calm approach, noting that she turned down lucrative offers to stay focused on her congressional responsibilities. Her reputation continued to grow in committee rooms. Witnesses approached her questioning with caution, aware of the viral moment that had made her famous. A staffer told Politico that whenever Crockett opened her notebook, everyone in the room paid attention. Nobody wanted to be the next viral clip back home. Her approval ratings rose and businesses displayed "Keep Calm and Crockett" on signs. Even voters who disagreed with her politics said they respected her professionalism and focus on facts. For Bondi, the aftermath was far more difficult. Media requests for public records opened new scrutiny of her consulting work, especially her firm's connections to contractors receiving state funds. The Florida Ethics Commission began reviewing complaints, which triggered another round of negative headlines. Speaking engagements were quietly canceled, a book deal was delayed, and several Republican campaigns reduced or stopped contacting her. Why risk attaching your candidate to someone known for losing control on camera? One strategist said anonymously. Bondi tried to push back against the narrative, but a tense and emotional TV appearance only fueled more criticism. Communications experts said she was reinforcing the very perception she was trying to break. 10 days after the hearing, Bondi announced she was stepping back from public appearances to focus on client work, a move widely seen as recognition of the damage to her career. Campaign training groups began using the exchange in their programs, calling it the Crockett contrast, a vivid example of how calm, prepared communication can outperform emotional reactions in high-pressure political moments. When we show the clip and ask audiences which communication style builds credibility, the answer is almost universal. People across political backgrounds agree that calm, fact-based responses consistently outperform emotional reactions, no matter what the actual argument is about. Polling supported this conclusion, revealing that independent voters who often decide tight elections preferred Crockett's steadiness over Bondi's anger by nearly a 4-to-1 margin. Even individuals who align more closely with Bondi's political views began signing up for media training, asking specifically for help developing the poise Crockett displayed. One well-known communications coach noted that clients from both parties, as well as corporate leaders and public relations professionals, were requesting Crockett-level calm. Rarely does a single public exchange so clearly show the superiority of one communication approach over another. As the news cycle moved forward, the lasting influence of the moment became increasingly obvious. Beyond shaping the political trajectories of the two women involved, the exchange offered a strong reminder of how communication works in an age where nearly everything can be recorded and shared instantly. Many saw in Crockett's measured response a glimpse of a healthier form of political engagement, proof that civility and effectiveness are not opposites, but often reinforce one another. Whether this realization would lead to a broader shift in political behavior was still uncertain. But for the millions who watched and shared the clip, The comparison between Bondi's anger and Crockett's composure made the lesson easy to grasp. In the court of public opinion, clarity and calm almost always win.